Airline staff mock black woman. Then she reveals she's their new boss. In the bustling terminals of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, where hundreds of flights crisscross the skies every day, a single encounter sparks an unexpected storm. Airline staff, consumed by gossip and blinded by prejudice, pick on a seemingly unassuming black woman. Their laughter fills the corridors and their mocking words echo. Yet they have no idea who she really is or the power she wields. When the truth is finally unveiled, it ignites a seismic shift that rocks the entire operation. Get ready for an unforgettable tale of drama, power plays, and karma served ice cold. No one will ever see it coming. The day began like any other at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, roaring airplanes overhead, endless lines at security checkpoints, and the persistent hiss of the public address system calling out flight numbers. There was a tangible hum of anticipation in the air, fueled by travelers eager to chase business deals, family reunions, or well-deserved vacations. Among the swarm of passengers checking in at the Delta Airlines counters, one woman blended easily into the crowd. Her name was Nadine Reynolds, a poised and quietly confident black woman in her early 40s. She wore a tailored navy suit that complemented her tall, athletic frame. A large leather tote swung at her side, stuffed with documents and a laptop, hinting that she was more than just a casual tourist. Nadine offered a polite smile to the gate attendant, who barely looked up before mechanically scanning her boarding pass. She didn't take offense. She was used to traveling incognito and used to being overlooked by harried staff. Besides, she had arrived a day early for a very important meeting, one that would launch her into a new and influential role at Delta. Unbeknownst to nearly everyone around her, Nadine had just been promoted to Senior Regional Operations Manager, a position that oversaw multiple airport hubs, including the one in Atlanta. Her start date was officially tomorrow. But tonight she was just another passenger in a sea of anxious travelers, boarding a short flight from Nashville to Atlanta. She had kept the appointment hush-hush. Only a handful of top executives in Delta's corporate office knew of her early arrival. Fate, however, seemed to have other plans. As she approached the gate, Nadine overheard a pair of gate agents gossiping about some new big-shot manager set to arrive, rumored to be tough and uncompromising. They had no clue that the woman they were casually talking about was standing just 3 feet away, inconspicuous in her traveler's attire. Nadine listened quietly, gleaning pieces of information, how some staffers were anxious about upcoming changes, how there were swirling rumors about job cuts or departmental shake-ups. They say she's never satisfied. One agent snickered. Watch her come in and start firing people left and right. The other agent rolled her eyes. Like we don't have enough stress. Another boss who thinks she knows better than everyone else. Nadine kept her composure, though the remarks stung. She'd always prided herself on being fair-minded and giving people a chance to prove themselves. The rumors were just that, rumors. But it hurt to know that the staff already judged her without ever meeting her. Moments later, Nadine quietly boarded her flight to Atlanta. She sank into her seat, letting out a slow breath. As the plane rumbled down the runway, she closed her eyes and tried to push aside the gossip she had just overheard. Tomorrow, she would finally step into her new role. For better or worse, she'd face the reality of employees who already seemed wary of her. Yet even she could not foresee the level of open disrespect she was about to encounter within the airline's own ranks, and how that disrespect would ignite a chain reaction of dramatic twists and karmic payback no one could have predicted. Early the next morning, Nadine stepped into the sprawling arrivals hall of Hartsfield-Jackson, a place she'd frequented countless times but now saw in a new light. It was soon to be under her management. Her polished shoes clicked against the shiny tile floor as she navigated through throngs of passengers. Despite the frenetic atmosphere, families wrangling luggage, business people rushing to connect flights, and staff directing travelers, Nadine felt a sense of calm purpose. Her first official meeting with the local leadership was scheduled for later that afternoon. She had hours to spare, so she decided to explore unannounced, observing how the staff interacted with customers. Blending in was easy enough. She had swapped her corporate suit for business casual slacks and a fitted blouse. The only giveaway that she was more than just another passenger was the small gold Delta lapel pin resting discreetly on her collar. As she made her way to Concourse B, Nadine noticed a commotion near a boarding gate. A short line of passengers waited impatiently to check in for a flight, while behind the desk, two gate agents exchanged exasperated glances. One agent, a young man named Todd, had a scowl etched into his face. His co-worker, an older woman named Marcia, tapped her nails on the counter, her impatience palpable. A young black mother stood at the desk, balancing a toddler on her hip, while she rummaged through her purse for a missing ID. Todd sighed loudly and tapped at his keyboard. "Ma'am, I told you we need proper identification for the infant if you want to board." The woman offered an apologetic smile, clearly flustered. "I'm sorry, I must have left the birth certificate in my other bag." Todd let out a derisive laugh and glanced sideways at Marcia. "Typical," he muttered under his breath, though loud enough for Nadine, who was several feet away, to catch. Marcia, smirking, just shook her head as though the passenger were a lost cause. Nadine felt her chest tighten. This was beyond impatience. It was mocking. More than that, it carried an undertone of prejudice. She quickly stepped forward, wanting to intervene, but also aware that she needed to gauge the full extent of what was happening. "Is there anything you can do to assist her?" Nadine asked Todd calmly, stepping into the mother's defense. Todd looked up, rolling his eyes, clearly annoyed at the interruption. He took in Nadine's attire, business casual, but not an official gate agent uniform, thus assuming she was just another passenger. His face crunched in a dismissive sneer. "Who are you exactly?" "Look, this is airline policy, okay? No ID, no boarding." Marcia chimed in, taking a pointed jab at Nadine. "We have procedures for a reason, miss. If she can't follow them, that's her problem." Nadine reined in her rising frustration. "I'm sure there are ways to handle this politely. The passenger may be confused about the documentation requirements. Maybe you can help her find an alternative or see if a digital copy would suffice, if that's permissible under Delta guidelines." Todd's lips curled into a half smile. "You run an airline or something. Don't lecture us on policy." Marcia looked from Todd to Nadine with an amused expression. "Seriously, who do you think you are?" Nadine's heart pounded. She recognized that letting her identity slip right then might cause a scene, but the disrespect not only to the passenger but also to her stung like a wasp. She took a calming breath, resolved to keep her composure. "Soon," she thought, "they'll know exactly who I am, and we'll see how they handle their arrogance when the tables turn." For now, she tried to de-escalate. Turning to the mother, Nadine gently explained an alternative documentation approach and asked if she could access any digital records from her phone. The young woman nodded gratefully, stepping aside to search her email for a scanned copy. Meanwhile, Todd and Marcia shared a quiet laugh, clearly dismissing Nadine as an overzealous bystander. Nadine's jaw tightened. This was her first direct impression of the staff she was about to manage. If such unprofessional and borderline bigoted behavior was happening in plain sight, she could only imagine what else she might uncover. She decided to continue observing, but inside, she was already drafting a plan to address these attitudes head-on. And Todd and Marcia had no idea what storm was coming their way. A few hours later, Nadine walked into a conference room on the administrative level of Hartsfield-Jackson. The space was modern and sleek, with a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the runway. Sunlight spilled onto the polished table, where a half-dozen chairs were arranged. She noted the fresh stack of documents at each seat, along with name placards for the local management team. This was the moment Nadine had been waiting for, the introduction to her staff and colleagues. She was anticipating professional courtesy, if not an outright warm welcome. But as she stepped inside, the tension in the room was palpable. 4 people were already seated: Frank Dennison, the station manager; Angela Wong, the operations supervisor; Keith Bailey, the lead customer service manager; and Alicia Porter, the HR liaison. They glanced at Nadine with expressions ranging from guarded curiosity to mild annoyance. "Good afternoon," Nadine began, her tone confident but polite. "I'm Nadine Reynolds, your new Senior Regional Operations Manager. It's a pleasure to meet everyone." Frank, a balding man in his 50s, barely rose from his seat. "Right, yes. We've heard quite a bit about you," he said, holding a forced smile. "We didn't realize you'd be arriving early. Thought the official start was tomorrow." "I wanted to see the operations firsthand, unannounced," Nadine said calmly. "I'm a big believer in experiencing the day-to-day as a passenger might before diving into the formalities." Angela, a petite woman with sharp eyes, narrowed her gaze. "We have a fairly efficient system here, Miss Reynolds. You might have heard we consistently meet our on-time departure metrics." Nadine nodded, taking a seat. She picked up the printed agenda from the table. "I'm well aware of the numbers. But success isn't just on-time performance, is it? It's also about customer satisfaction and staff morale." Her words hung in the air. Keith Bailey, who managed the gate agents and ground staff, cleared his throat. "You're talking about the softer metrics, I suppose. While that's important, let's not forget the primary reason we exist: to safely and promptly service the flights. If a few customers get upset over small things, that's unfortunately part of the business." Nadine's jaw tensed. A few customers upset over small things? She wondered how Todd and Marcia's behavior would be classified. Probably just another small thing to him. "I think we can strive for both, Mr. Bailey," she replied, her voice unwavering. "Safety, punctuality, and respect for every passenger." Alicia Porter, the HR liaison, observed the interaction but remained quiet. Nadine could tell Alicia was taking mental notes, possibly weighing whether to side with the old guard or see merit in the new manager's approach. Frank decided to steer the meeting into official territory. He pulled out a thick binder labeled Delta, ATL Station, briefing materials. As the group started running through the day's agenda, financial targets, staff scheduling, upcoming seasonal changes, Nadine listened attentively. She jotted down observations, especially where she saw potential cracks in the armor of efficiency that the local managers praised. She was looking for the root causes of certain staff attitudes, and whether these attitudes were tolerated or even implicitly encouraged. Meanwhile, Frank and Keith occasionally threw skeptical glances at Nadine, as if testing her knowledge or dedication. They seemed unconvinced that someone from outside their tight-knit circle could bring meaningful improvements. By the time the meeting ended, Nadine had learned more than she'd expected. She saw how the local station managers viewed their role in a vacuum, obsessed with operational metrics to the point of dismissing concerns about employee behavior. She also sensed that some staff might be towing the line or even crossing it, without fear of reprimand. As the team packed up, Frank gave Nadine a brief nod. "We look forward to working with you. Let's see how you'll fit into our system here." The implication was clear: you're on our turf now. Nadine met his gaze, unwavering. "I appreciate your time. I'll be spending the next week familiarizing myself with every corner of this operation, unannounced visits, shadowing employees, and so on. I hope to see all of you on the floor from time to time as well." She stood, gathering her notes. Angela and Keith exchanged uneasy looks, while Frank forced another thin smile. The battle lines had been drawn, even if politely. Nadine could almost feel the chill in the air as she left the room. But she was resolute. She didn't become senior regional operations manager by avoiding conflicts or turning a blind eye to disrespectful behavior. If there were staff members who mocked customers or even their new boss, there would be repercussions in the very near future. On her second day, Nadine's plan to observe operations up close took her to the baggage claim area, where she'd heard travelers frequently lodged complaints about lost or mishandled luggage. She wore a simple black blazer and slacks, her delta lapel pin again the only subtle hint of her position. It didn't take long for her to encounter friction. A distraught elderly couple was at the baggage services counter, clearly distressed about a lost suitcase containing valuable medications. The agent on duty, an older man named George, was typing half-heartedly into the computer system. He seemed uninterested in the couple's plight, offering only robotic responses and unsympathetic shrugs. Nadine stepped in. She approached George with a calm but firm demeanor. "Is there a more proactive approach we can take here?" George glanced up, surprised to see a sharply dressed woman who did not look like a typical passenger. "Ma'am, I'm working on it," he said flatly. Tracking the bag, seeing if it got routed to the wrong flight, the couple looked to Nadine with pleading eyes, as if to say, "Please help us." Nadine's heart went out to them. "Could you check with the last known location? Maybe call that gate directly and see if the bag is sitting there," she suggested. George gave her an irritated look. "Look, we have a process. I fill out this form, then the computer sends an alert to whichever airport might have it. If they find the bag, they let us know, and we contact the passenger." Nadine pressed gently, "But this is urgent. There are important medications in that suitcase." George sighed. "I understand that, but we can't break procedure just because someone is in a hurry. If you want special treatment, maybe contact a supervisor." She offered a polite smile. "Indeed. Let's do that." His frustration flared. "I am the supervisor for baggage claims this shift. So, unless you outrank me, you might want to wait." Nadine's composure never wavered. "I see. Well, let's try a different angle, shall we? Please hand me the phone. I'll call the gate myself." That was the final straw for Georges. He rolled his eyes and huffed. "Who do you think you are?" Before Nadine could respond, the elderly wife, who had been watching the exchange, said softly, "She's the first person who's actually cared about our problem. Isn't that enough?" A flicker of guilt passed over George's face. He hesitated, then grabbed the phone and started dialing the gate number, doing exactly what Nadine had suggested. Nadine stayed by the couple's side, reassuring them that they'd resolve this quickly. A few minutes later, Georg hung up the phone, offering a somewhat begrudging nod. The bag's still sitting at gate 12. Apparently, the tag got scanned incorrectly. "They'll bring it here shortly." Relief spread across the couple's features. They thanked Nadine profusely, while Georg slumped in his chair, clearly annoyed at having been forced to deviate from his usual protocol. Nadine escorted the elderly couple to a nearby seating area, assuring them the suitcase would arrive soon. As she walked back, she caught sight of George exchanging eye rolls with a younger agent, as if mocking Nadine's approach to problem-solving. The younger agent chuckled, and Nadine felt a spark of anger ignite in her chest. She took a mental note of his name badge, C. Phillips. Another staff member with questionable attitude, she thought. There's a pattern here. With each passing encounter, the scope of Nadine's challenge became clearer. She was not just dealing with one or two problem employees. There seemed to be a culture of indifference, even derision toward passengers. A culture that might also harbor biases, as she'd seen with Todd and Marcia. The question nagged at her, were these employees merely overworked and jaded, or did they believe they were untouchable? If so, they were in for a rude awakening. Nadine vowed to dig deeper, knowing that the real showdown was yet to come and that she would eventually reveal her true position in a manner no one would forget. To truly understand the culture, Nadine knew she had to go where the staff relaxed and let their guard down. She had always believed that break rooms often provided the clearest glimpse into how employees really felt about their workplace and each other. It was late afternoon when Nadine found her way to a plain, windowless room tucked behind the baggage claim area. A few chipped tables, mismatched chairs, and a vending machine humming in the corner gave the room a drab appearance. A half-eaten box of donuts sat on a table next to crumpled soda cans. Inside were 3 gate agents she recognized from her observations: Todd, Marcia, and the younger agent from baggage claim, C. Phillips. They were immersed in conversation, their voices hushed but animated. Nadine lingered by the doorway, mostly out of sight, and listened. So they say the new big boss is some big deal woman from another region. Some people claim she's a real ball-buster, Todd snorted. I heard the name Nadine something. Marcia sipped her coffee, rolling her eyes. Nadine Reynolds, apparently. Paffed, she won't last a month in this hub. We have our ways here. C. Phillips let out a short laugh. That's what I like to hear. Ain't nobody messing up my routine. If she tries to enforce new rules, we'll just do the bare minimum. And you know Frank's on our side. Nadine's pulse quickened. She was taken aback by the open hostility. More than that, it appeared they had an ally in Frank Dennison, the station manager. She recalled his chilly demeanor at the meeting and realized that much bigger currents were swirling beneath the surface. Todd snickered. Did you see that one black lady earlier who tried to correct me at the gate? She was stepping in like she knew the policies better than me. People need to stay in their lane. Marcia patted Todd's shoulder mockingly. Poor baby, you had to deal with the know-it-alls. Probably a wannabe. Maybe she's just some new trainer or something. At those words, Nadine felt her blood boil. She remembered Todd's sneering expression from that morning and how dismissive Marcia had been. But she also sensed an opportunity. She'd been thinking about how best to reveal her authority, and the break-room gossip only confirmed that a direct confrontation might be overdue. The conversation shifted to personal anecdotes, with each agent boasting about times they'd shown a passenger who's boss. They laughed about making customers wait or subtly humiliating them for minor infractions. Nadine's stomach churned. This was beyond simple frustration with a demanding job. It was a culture of contempt. Finally, Nadine stepped into the room, making her presence known. The agents froze, eyes darting up to meet hers. Todd looked especially alarmed, but tried to mask it with a dismissive sneer. Didn't realize we had company, Marcia muttered. Nadine offered a tight smile, her eyes flicking over each of them. Just looking for a place to take a short break, she said. Then she paused, letting the tension mount. And to get to know my co-workers better. She could see it in their faces, she said co-workers. They were puzzled, but not yet putting the pieces together. Nadine decided to bide her time a little longer. A confrontation now might simply escalate into a shouting match. She wanted a more strategic approach, one that would ensure the problem was addressed at its roots. Carry on, Nadine said, heading toward the vending machine. But in that moment, she committed every face, every mocking remark, firmly to memory. Their arrogance was staggering, yet they clearly had no clue just how precarious their position was about to become. Soon enough, the mocking would turn into remorse and fear for that much. Nadine was certain. After a week of discreet observations, Nadine had a growing dossier of employee interactions and a clearer picture of the toxic culture in certain corners of the Atlanta station. Though she had encountered many diligent, respectful staff members, baggage handlers, flight attendants, customer service reps, she kept returning to the glaring behavior of employees like Todd, Marcia, George, and C. Phillips. They were the tip of an iceberg that could sink passenger satisfaction if left unchecked. Her next major step was a video conference call with Delta's corporate headquarters. On the agenda was an operational status update, but Nadine intended to use the meeting to propose an overhaul of training protocols, disciplinary measures, and reward systems for outstanding customer service. The call took place in a small conference room with a large screen showing three key executives: Margaret Liu from corporate HR, Kevin Price from operations, and Sergio D'Amico, the vice president overseeing multiple regional managers, including Nadine. She presented her findings systematically: incidents of mockery, dismissive attitudes, and prejudicial behavior. She highlighted how certain staffers openly bragged about sabotage or humiliating passengers. She even recounted her direct experiences with Todd and Marcia. Margaret Liu, the HR executive, sighed deeply. "This is alarming, Miss Reynolds. Were you able to identify any root causes?" Nadine nodded. "There's a sense of impunity. Some local managers seem to prioritize metrics like on-time departures over customer treatment. It creates a culture where rudeness is tolerated as long as flights leave on schedule." Kevin Price from operations furrowed his brow. "That's not how we want to run things. Delta's brand is built on both efficiency and hospitality." Sergio D'Amico cleared his throat, leaning closer to the camera. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair, exuding an air of authority. "Nadine, I authorized your new position to address these exact issues. I'm impressed with your thoroughness. Now, how do we fix this?" She took a breath, relieved to have the backing of upper management. "We start with accountability. I recommend a mandatory retraining for all station managers and frontline staff on customer relations and anti-discrimination policies. Plus, I think we need to shake up local leadership if they're complicit." The executives exchanged glances. Margaret Liu said, "That's a big step. Frank Dennison has been station manager here for nearly 15 years. Nadine kept her voice steady. That might be part of the problem. An old guard that's resistant to change, allowing toxic behavior to fester." Sergio studied her intently. "I trust your judgment, Nadine. However, it's crucial you handle this carefully. If you go in swinging, you'll face internal pushback. We'll support you, but we need to see a strategic plan." "I have one in mind," Nadine replied, her tone resolute. "I'll gather conclusive evidence of wrongdoing and use it as a basis for disciplinary action. Then I'll implement a station-wide reboot of policy, training, and leadership evaluations." Kevin Price nodded, satisfied. "Good. Let us know what resources you need. We'll make them available." The call ended with firm approvals for Nadine's initiative. Though she felt validated, she also recognized the high stakes. The next few weeks would be a delicate operation, unveiling the full extent of misconduct while navigating the potential hostility of entrenched managers. Yet she couldn't deny a spark of anticipation. The moment she would formally reveal her authority to the staff, particularly those who had openly mocked her, was drawing near. She was determined to make that revelation a turning point, not just a dramatic gotcha moment. If done right, it could serve as the catalyst for authentic change. Nadine gathered her files and stepped out of the conference room, her mind whirling with possibilities. The clock was ticking, and the time for a reckoning was fast approaching. Emboldened by corporate support, Nadine spent the following days methodically gathering evidence and speaking discreetly with more employees. She uncovered a hidden world of cliques and alliances, managers protecting their favorites, staff members covering for each other's misdeeds, and a handful of genuinely caring employees whose voices were drowned out by the negativity around them. Her plan had two main components. First, she intended to call a station-wide meeting, one that would be mandatory for every employee, from gate agents to ground crew, and even back office personnel. This meeting would serve as a grand unveiling of new policies and the official stance of corporate. Second, she would follow up with individual disciplinary actions for those who had flagrantly violated company standards of conduct. When Nadine approached Frank Dennison about scheduling this meeting, he looked perplexed. "We don't typically call gatherings with everyone," he said. "That would disrupt operations." Nadine remained firm. "We'll stagger it by shifts and ensure minimal impact on flights." "But this is non-negotiable." Frank's brow creased, a flash of irritation crossing his face. "Fine. I suppose we have to comply with corporate's directive." She nodded, reading his mood. He might claim it was a corporate directive, but in truth, she knew he had no idea how close the corporate relationship truly was to her agenda. She had to be cautious. If Frank suspected his own position was at risk, he could try to sabotage her efforts. Next, Nadine circulated a memo about the mandatory meeting, ensuring it emphasized positive change, an exciting new chapter for Delta's Atlanta operations. She wanted to quell rumors that she was some tyrant come to wield an axe. Nonetheless, the undercurrent of apprehension was palpable. Meanwhile, Todd, Marcia, and Phillips were oblivious to the storm building around them. They carried on mocking passengers and complaining about the new boss. Todd bragged to a co-worker, "If she tries to come down on us, we'll just do a work to rule slowdown. She'll have to back off." Unbeknownst to them, Nadine had quietly compiled witness statements, passenger complaints, and even video footage from security cameras that captured their rude behavior. She took no pleasure in the idea of penalizing employees, but she couldn't overlook their consistent disrespect, especially if it crossed into racist or discriminatory territory. In a stroke of irony, Nadine found an ally in Alicia Porter, the HR liaison who had been cautiously observing the station's dynamics. Over coffee in the airport staff lounge, Alicia confided that she'd faced significant pushback whenever she tried to discipline employees who had powerful friends in management. "Frank is protective of Todd and Marcia," Alicia revealed. "They've been around a while and he sees them as untouchable." "It's going to get messy." Nadine set her coffee cup down firmly. "We'll weather the mess. This station needs a reboot, Alicia. And if Frank stands in the way, corporate will side with us." Alicia looked relieved but also anxious. "Just be careful. People can lash out when they feel cornered." Nadine nodded, her eyes steeled with resolve. "I know, but cornered animals are often the easiest to expose." With the mandatory meeting set for the end of the week, the stage was nearly ready. Nadine felt the weight of the moment. This would be her opportunity not just to reveal her leadership, but to chart a new path forward. And in doing so, she would finally confront those who thought mocking a black woman, any black woman, was acceptable. They were about to learn how painfully wrong they'd been. 3 days before the big station-wide meeting, Nadine caught wind of another incident that pushed her patience to the limit. A frequent flyer, an older black businessman named Mr. Holland, had been waiting for assistance at the priority check-in line for nearly 10 minutes, while Todd and Marcia openly chatted and joked with each other about their weekend plans. Growing irritated, Mr. Holland politely requested help, only for Todd to brush him off with a curt, "We'll get to you, sir, when we're free." The dismissive tone was enough to draw stares from other passengers. When Mr. Holland asked to speak to a manager, Marcia looked at Todd and smirked before snapping back, "We're the only ones here right now." Word reached Nadine via a junior agent who had witnessed the exchange and was uncomfortable with the tension it created. Nadine immediately headed to the check-in counter, stepping in just as Todd and Marcia were rolling their eyes at Mr. Holland. "Is there a problem here?" she asked calmly. Todd glanced at Nadine, recognition crossing his face. "Oh, it's you again," he muttered, referencing their encounter days earlier. We're just busy, okay? Marcia chimed in. We can't drop everything for one passenger, no matter how important they think they are. Mr. Holland was visibly frustrated, but he maintained his composure. I've been a Diamond Medallion member for over a decade, and I've never seen such an unprofessional attitude. He turned to Nadine, not yet knowing who she was. Thank you for stepping in. At least someone is trying to help. Nadine nodded. Sir, one apologize for any inconvenience. Let's get you taken care of right away. She then turned to Todd and Marcia. You two can step aside. I'll handle this passenger. Todd's eyes flashed in anger. Excuse me? You have no authority here. Nadine didn't raise her voice, but her measured tone carried weight. Actually, I do have authority. She pulled a small ID card from her blazer pocket. The Delta Airlines insignia shone against her professional photograph. I'm Nadine Reynolds, the new Senior Regional Operations Manager for Delta. Effective immediately, I oversee this entire station's operations, including check-in counters. Marcia's jaw dropped. Todd's sneer vanished, replaced by a look of sudden panic. Passengers nearby, those who had overheard the tension, fell silent, eyes darting between Nadine and the two agents. For a moment, Todd struggled for words, his face turning red. We didn't know, he finally stammered. Miss Reynolds, we can, Nadine stepped behind the counter, effortlessly logging into the system. Mr. Holland, would you please hand me your ID and itinerary? I'll ensure your check-in is finalized quickly. Turning her attention to Todd and Marcia, she added, We'll have a conversation about your conduct later. For now, consider yourselves relieved of duty for the remainder of this shift. Alicia Porter from HR will be in touch with next steps. Marcia spluttered. But, Nadine fixed her with an unwavering stare. Do you need me to repeat myself? Cowed, both agents slunk away from the counter, their bravado crushed. Mr. Holland watched the entire exchange with a quiet smile of approval. Nadine swiftly completed his check-in, made sure to offer him a heartfelt apology for the poor service, and even provided a voucher for lounge access. As Mr. Holland thanked her and walked away, Nadine exhaled, feeling the weight of the confrontation lift. Passengers who had witnessed the incident dispersed, some murmuring about how surprising it was to see a senior manager step in so personally. Unbeknownst to Todd and Marcia, the real consequences of their actions were only beginning. By forcibly revealing her position, Nadine had taken a public stand against their disrespect. Soon, the entire station would learn that mocking a black woman or any passenger had tangible repercussions, and that the new boss was neither powerless nor inclined to tolerate their games. News of Nadine's public takedown of Todd and Marcia spread through the airport like wildfire. Staff members whispered the story in corridors, break rooms, and on shuttle buses, ferrying them between parking lots and terminals. Many were stunned that the unassuming black woman they'd seen roaming the station was, in fact, their new Senior Regional Operations Manager. Some employees, the decent, hard-working majority, felt relieved. For too long, they'd endured the toxic behaviors of a small but influential clique. They saw Nadine's intervention as a long overdue breath of fresh air. Others, particularly those close to Todd, Marcia, or station manager Frank Dennison, felt uneasy. They worried about losing the protective shield they'd enjoyed under the old ways. Frank himself seethed in his office. He'd heard how Nadine had unilaterally sidelined two of his trusted gate agents. He phoned Keith Bailey, the lead customer service manager, venting his anger. Who does she think she is? She's stepping into day-to-day operations, undermining our chain of command. Keith responded carefully. She's got corporate backing, Frank. We can't just brush her off. Maybe we need to cooperate, at least on the surface. Frank slammed a binder shut. Cooperate? With someone who's out to dismantle everything I've built here. Keith hesitated. He and Frank had aligned interests, but he also sensed the tide turning. Listen, if she's got the power, we'd better play along, at least until we figure out our next move. Meanwhile, Todd and Marcia were escorted to a disciplinary hearing with Alicia Porter and Nadine. Their faces were pale, their confidence shattered. Nadine presented them with written warnings documenting their repeated misconduct. She also informed them they would be placed on unpaid suspension for a minimum of 1 week. You can contest this, Nadine told them, but my report includes multiple eyewitness accounts, passenger complaints, and even security footage. Your best bet is to reflect on whether you're willing to meet Delta's standards going forward. Todd hung his head, muttering, "This is ridiculous. We were just doing our jobs." Marcia's voice quavered. "Yeah, you're blowing this out of proportion." Nadine's gaze hardened. "Mocking passengers is not your job. Refusing to assist them is not your job. I'm enforcing our official guidelines on customer service and workplace conduct. If you find that unfair, you're free to seek employment elsewhere." They left the office, their attitudes subdued, though Nadine doubted they'd had a true change of heart. Still, she had made her point. Throughout the station, employees began to take notice. Some scrambled to adjust their behavior, worried about being the next target of Nadine's zero-tolerance stance. Others reached out to her directly, sharing stories of mistreatment they'd experienced or witnessed, hoping for a fair resolution. Slowly, the station's culture began to shift. Yet, Nadine knew the battle wasn't won. She still had to contend with Frank, whose authority had been undermined. The mandatory all-station meeting was just 2 days away, and she could sense him plotting how to regain control. Nadine resolved to stay vigilant. If Frank tried to sabotage her efforts, she would be ready. For now, the immediate fallout worked in Nadine's favor. Staff who once laughed behind her back had gone silent, realizing they'd misread her entirely. Their untouchable clique was no longer protected by anonymity or favoritism. And so, the pieces fell into place for the final confrontation, a moment that would either solidify Nadine's new order or plunge the station into deeper discord. The day of the much-anticipated station-wide meeting arrived. By corporate directive and Nadine's insistence, the entire staff would attend in staggered groups to minimize disruption to flights. The first session kicked off in a spacious, unused airline lounge, repurposed for the event. Rows of chairs faced a small podium, and a large projector screen displayed the Delta logo alongside the words, "Atlanta Station, New Horizons." Nadine stood at the podium, scanning the crowd. She saw a sea of faces, some curious, some hopeful, and some visibly resentful. Among the latter was Frank Dennison, arms crossed as he stood at the back of the room, flanked by a few staunch supporters. Keith Bailey had chosen a seat in the front row, a neutral expression plastered on his face. Alicia Porter waited off to the side, ready to chime in on HR matters. "Welcome, everyone," Nadine began, her voice clear. "I appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to be here. I know that calling an all-staff meeting is unusual, but these are unusual times. Delta Corporate has tasked me with improving our station's performance, not just in metrics like on-time flights, but in overall customer satisfaction and workforce morale." A soft murmur rippled through the audience. Nadine proceeded to detail the station's successes: aircraft turnaround efficiency, baggage handling improvements, highlighting the hard work many employees contributed. She then transitioned to the challenges. "We've had too many reports of rude or dismissive behavior toward passengers, and in some cases, overt discrimination. That's unacceptable. We're better than that." She saw Todd, recently returned from suspension, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Marcia was present as well, arms folded, eyes down. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Nadine clicked to a slide outlining new initiatives, mandatory customer service retraining, emphasizing empathy, clear communication, and bias awareness. Revised disciplinary procedures, ensuring accountability for those who violate company policies or engage in disrespectful conduct. Open-door feedback policy. Employees at all levels could report issues or suggest improvements directly to Nadine's office without fear of reprisal. She paused, letting the weight of these changes sink in. I know some of you might see this as an intrusion or as unnecessary, but I assure you, these measures come from the highest levels of Delta Corporate. The world is watching how we treat our customers, how we treat each other. A voice interrupted from the back. Frank, Miss Reynolds, don't you think you're overhauling things a bit too quickly? Most of our staff have been doing their jobs for years without issue. Nadine met his gaze. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Dennison. But if there truly were no issues, we wouldn't have the volume of complaints we're seeing. Let's not pretend everything is perfect. We owe it to the employees and the passengers to address these challenges head-on. An uneasy hush fell. Nadine continued, Delta isn't just an airline, it's a brand built on trust and hospitality. If we lose those core values, we lose the loyalty of our customers. And if our employees feel undervalued or let toxicity fester, the entire operation suffers. When she finished, Alicia Porter stepped up to explain the HR perspective, fielding questions about updated grievance procedures and confidentiality protections. Nadine watched the audience closely, noting pockets of approval and pockets of defiance. Frank stood stiffly, making no move to speak again. As the session ended, Nadine concluded with a pointed message. This station has immense potential, but potential means nothing if we're divided by disrespect and negativity. My door is open. Let's rise together. Applause rippled through some corners of the room. Others, like Frank's faction, remained silent. Yet Nadine felt a surge of determination. The new policies were now out in the open, endorsed by corporate. Any attempts to undermine them would face strong headwinds. The day wasn't done, though. Nadine had multiple sessions to conduct, ensuring every shift got the same message. And she had a feeling the final pushback from Frank or Todd or others was just around the corner. Regardless, she was ready to stand her ground. The final session of the day concluded as the late evening shift clocked in. Nadine had repeated her presentation and answered questions from a new set of employees. She was physically exhausted, but mentally charged. The rollout had gone relatively smoothly, though tension still simmered in certain circles. After the last group filed out, Nadine began collecting her materials. She was about to shut down the projector when Frank Dennison walked in, wearing an expression that could curdle milk. Behind him were Keith Bailey and another manager, Carla Reyes, who looked uneasy. Miss Reynolds, we need to talk, Frank said, his tone clipped. Nadine turned to face him. Of course, let's talk. Frank crossed his arms. I've been station manager here for 15 years. I've achieved record on-time performance, high baggage efficiency, and minimal safety incidents. Now you come in with your grand ideas, telling us we need our boot. I think you're overstepping. Keith cleared his throat, trying to mediate. Frank, she does have corporate backing. Frank shot him a glare. I know that, Keith, but corporate's not here in the trenches. I am, and I'm telling Miss Reynolds, you don't just waltz in and declare half our staff incompetent. Nadine kept her tone calm. I never said anyone was incompetent, Mr. Dennison. I said some employees are engaging in behaviors that harm our brand and disrespect customers. Carla Reyes, a usually quiet manager, stepped forward tentatively. Frank, we've had complaints. You know that. Alicia's been bringing them to HR for months. Maybe it's time. Frank slammed a hand on the table. Stay out of this, Carla. I know what's best for this station. The sudden outburst made Carla flinch. Nadine kept her gaze on Frank, reading the anger and desperation etched on his face. He feels cornered, threatened. Softening her tone, Nadine said, Mr. Dennison, the first respect your years of service. But clearly, some issues have slipped through the cracks. I'm here to address them, not to tear down everything you've built. Let's find a path forward together. Frank scoffed. Yeah, your path forward is suspending my best gate agents, threatening more disciplinary actions, and telling us we need to train for biases. You're humiliating me and them in front of the entire station. Nadine exhaled slowly. Would you prefer we ignore the complaints? That we allow employees to mock passengers based on race or perceived status? He faltered for a moment, eyes darting between Keith and Carla. That's not what I'm saying. But what? Nadine pressed gently. Because if your best gate agents are mocking passengers, they're not actually good employees. Good employees treat every customer with respect, no matter how they feel personally. Keith stepped in again, trying to be diplomatic. Look, it's clear we have to clean up some of the attitudes here. Corporate's already on board with Nadine's plan. Maybe we can all meet halfway, and Frank threw up his hands. Fine, take her side, but don't expect me to applaud this mania. I've got enough to worry about without coddling every passenger who cries foul. With that, he stormed out, leaving an awkward silence in his wake. Carla's eyes hovered, unsure whether to follow Frank or stay. Finally, she mumbled a half-hearted apology and hurried after him. Nadine turned off the projector, her heart pounding. Keith let out a weary sigh. I tried to warn you. Frank's deeply entrenched. He believes any criticism of his station is a personal attack. This might get worse before it gets better. She nodded, a determined glint in her eye. I'm prepared for that. Sometimes you have to weather the storm to see the sunlight, Keith. They left the lounge, the echoes of Frank's anger still ringing in the quiet corridor. Nadine knew the final reckoning with him was approaching, a confrontation that might well decide the fate of the station's leadership. But she also knew this change was happening, and no amount of bluster or intimidation would halt its tide. The next few days were tumultuous. Frank Dennison, clearly bitter about Nadine's new policies, tried to rally his loyalists to resist. He spread rumors that the new boss was out to cut jobs, imposing impossible standards. Some employees believed him and resented Nadine. Others, including those who had suffered under the old regime, saw through his fear-mongering. Despite Frank's efforts, Nadine pressed on. Her open-door policy began to bear fruit. Employees came forward to share stories of harassment, unethical behavior, and intimidation under Frank's reign. Alicia Porter compiled these testimonies into formal reports. The tipping point came when a high-profile passenger, an executive from a Fortune 500 company, was subjected to racial slurs by a ramp supervisor who was part of Frank's inner circle. The passenger immediately lodged a complaint, which reached corporate in record time. With that final nail in the coffin, Sergio D'Amico from Delta's top leadership stepped in. An emergency video call was scheduled. Nadine, Frank, Alicia, and Sergio joined, along with the airline's legal counsel. Sergio's expression was solemn yet resolute. I've reviewed the complaints. Our brand is at risk. I can't overstate how serious this is. Frank tried to defend himself. We have isolated incidents. Sergio held up a hand. Frank, enough. You've been station manager for a long time, but under your watch there's been a consistent pattern of disrespect and discriminatory conduct. The new policies miss. Reynolds introduced should have had your full support, but instead you obstructed her efforts. He cast a regretful look at Nadine. Miss Reynolds, on behalf of Delta, I apologize for the internal resistance you've faced. That ends now. Sergio shifted his gaze back to Frank. We're placing you on indefinite administrative leave, effective immediately. An internal investigation will determine if termination or reassignment is necessary." Frank's face turned ashen. "You can't just—" "I can," Sergio replied firmly, "and I just did." A hush followed. Nadine felt a complex swirl of relief and sadness. Despite Frank's antagonism, it was never her goal to destroy his career, but his stubborn refusal to address a toxic culture had brought him to this moment. That afternoon, a memo was circulated station-wide, effective immediately. Frank Dennison was relieved of his duties. Nadine Reynolds would serve as the acting station manager, in addition to her regional operations role. The news spread like wildfire. Some employees were stunned, others quietly celebrated the end of an era. In the days that followed, Todd and Marcia returned from their suspensions with noticeably chastened attitudes. Rumor had it that they were actively looking for new jobs, fearing further repercussions. George, in baggage claim, kept his head down, following Nadine's new protocols. Even C. Phillips, once smug, avoided drawing attention to himself. At the same time, a renewed sense of optimism began to blossom among staff who genuinely wanted to do their jobs well. Nadine launched a series of listening sessions, inviting employees to brainstorm solutions for customer complaints. She also set up a reward system for exemplary service, shining a spotlight on those who went above and beyond for passengers. Her final act was a heartfelt message to the station: change can be intimidating, but it's also an opportunity. We have a chance to set a new standard here at Atlanta, to be the best of what Delta represents. In the end, the hard karma that struck Frank and his cohorts was not merely punishment, it was a course correction for an entire operation that had drifted off track. Nadine's quiet strength and unwavering commitment to respect had proven powerful enough to topple arrogance and prejudice. Standing in the terminal one evening, watching travelers hurry to their gates with a sense of calm efficiency, Nadine felt the weight of her new responsibilities, yet she also felt hope. A hope that from now on, no staff member would mock a passenger based on race, and no manager would protect such behavior. A hope that everyone, employees and customers alike, could start believing in Delta's promise of hospitality and fairness. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sergio. "Great work, Nadine. Keep leading by example." She smiled, slipping the phone back into her blazer pocket. Though the journey had been fraught with conflict, the future looked brighter than ever. Thank you for joining this riveting journey of power, prejudice, and transformation. From the moment Nadine Reynolds quietly arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson to her jaw-dropping revelation as the new senior regional operations manager, we witnessed a clash of wills that shook an entire airline station to its core. The staff who mocked her learned the hard way that appearances can be deceiving and that disrespect has consequences. Yet amid the drama, there's a valuable lesson. Real leadership means standing up for respect and fairness, even when it's difficult. If you found this story compelling, please hit that like button, share it with friends who value tales of karma and redemption, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more captivating narratives. Your engagement helps us continue bringing stories that inspire and challenge. Until next time, keep your eyes open for life's hidden twists, and remember that true power often resides in those we least expect.